So culture creation is really not that complicated of a process, but I think if you're not into culture like me, you're not into the arts and stuff like this, it's a little more complicated. And you might not fully understand it, but our culture is under attack right now, and our culture it's called the Cultural Revolution. So it's going on in Hollywood and other places around the West, and so we're experiencing cultural collapse as a result, and so we need to engage then in, like, we've tried to reform Hollywood. This has failed. And the reason is because it's a very effective thing happening right now in Hollywood. They have gatekeepers, and they keep things pretty clean over there. And so they don't want our types of people over there. And so we have to essentially do what the Daily Wire and Angel Studios are doing, and I spoke about them last week. But this is about doing something outside of Hollywood that is Hollywood unapproved, and it lambasts the narrative that Hollywood puts out. So, you're engaging in what's called cultural creation then. So here's what cultural creation is basically. I consider it a 3-step process. I guess you could consider it a 4-step process, but basically you have a community, and that community must filter your community experiences. So every community goes through experiences, and they have to filter these experiences, such as resource, wealth propagation, war and conflict, sin and crime, all these experiences that can be traumatic to a society and difficult for a community. You have to filter out these experiences. So you do that through culture. But in order to engage in culture creation, you have to filter out these community experiences through stronger, more resilient community filters. And those filters, also known as institutions, right, such as the family, the church, your male or female connection groups, your trade occupational communities, your critic and educational institutions, your community leadership, and your governmental institutions. All of those have to be stronger, more resilient filters, right? And so you get community, you get experiences, you filter them out through these institutions, and then what you get on the other end is cultural tools, which are forms of expression, right? You form those experiences into forms of expression. And so those forms of expression are things like your language, your holidays, your essential writings, your media and your news, all your art forms, and then eventually you boil it down to civilizational myths that define your culture accurately. So those are what I consider cultural tools. They're things that you use to deal with these difficulties you might go through. And so these are forms of expression, right? And so whenever you're expressing yourself in your community, you're often using these tools, these cultural tools. And then those things reach the 4th step, which is these things help mankind to learn, to heal, to survive, and to thrive no matter what threatens us or our children. So that's basically how to engage in cultural creation. You have to build stronger filters so that you can help heal from difficult community experiences. And then you form stronger cultural tools from that. And those could be forms of art. Those could be more robust language, or holidays, or excellent forms of media, teaching tools, and then there's your myths, which are many of these things all together in one. They could be a teaching tool. They could contain your language. They could contain holidays in them or days of observance. They could contain all kinds of news or history. And so these myths are very powerful. And they're often what gets boiled down after years and years, maybe possibly hundreds of years of creating cultural tools. Eventually you get down to some myths. And as I've spoken of before, J.R.R. Tolkien and Lewis called their own genre mythopoeia, which is an intentional creation of myths. So I'm a fan of mythopoeia. I think this is a great cultural tool. It's a highly effective cultural tool, but it requires that you understand your culture very implicitly in order to do that. So obviously, Tolkien was an expert in Western civilization and culture. So that's why he could make Lord of the Rings. So that's culture creation. You have to engage either as a filter, an institution, or you have to become a tool creator and create tools, cultural tools. So you could see this as a curator or an artist, essentially. But a curator basically filters, and an artist basically makes cultural tools. and it goes in a cycle, right? So you start with a community experience, it goes through a filter, a tool gets created, and it becomes again a community experience, right? That tool gets experienced by the community and becomes an experience, and then you filter again, and then that becomes another cultural tool, right? So it's a reaction to the reaction, and this just continues on in culture, and your culture grows more, evolves greater and more robustly, and then it can survive anything that comes at it. So if people start breaking down the filters, or they start breaking down the tools, then this cycle doesn't continue to evolve into something greater. It devolves and it gets unwound. And that's what we're seeing now with cultural revolution, is an unwinding of cultural power. So that's culture creation.